Right, Mark and Tiggy, hold up a sec. We are now live, but as I mentioned, I'll just check that we're up and running fully before I introduce you both. Bear with me. It looks like we are going. So, welcome back, everyone. This is live session number 11, and I'm very, very happy today to be joined by two lovely people from the wonderful Atlantic Salmon Trust. We're here with the CEO, Mark Bilsby, and the fundraising officer, Tiggy Pettifer. We're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff today, but Mark and Tiggy, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon.
Hello, boys. Thank you for having me.
It's going to be a fun afternoon of discussion. We're going to talk about the amazing work that you guys have been doing, the Moray Firth tagging project, looking at some of the results that have come in so far and what you've got in store for the future. But I thought if it's okay with you and with Mark and Tiggy, if it's okay with you two, I think we'll start off with showing a little video. So there's a little bit of background. What exactly are we going to see in this initial video, guys?
It's the Moray Firth tracking project, the work that we did. Actually, when we talk about tracking, this is the project. This is what we delivered last year. And it's a sort of 5-minute overview of the work and our initial findings, provide a basis for what we can have a talk about later.
Fantastic. Right. What I'll do is I will remove us all from the stream. And for everyone else who's watching, you'll see that little intro video. And if you're tuning in, I should just say, please comment along, drop some comments into the comment section on Facebook. And if there's anything that you'd like Mark and Tiggy to answer, if there's anything you'd like to find out. And as usual, if there's any kind of tech problem and our stream drops for some reason, stay on our Facebook page. We'll get it back up and running. It may take 2 minutes, it may take a couple of days, but we'll be back up and running. So watch out for it.
Point to us.
Let's get this video in. So sit back and enjoy this as an intro, and we'll start the discussion just afterwards.
Something spectacular has begun, and we want to share our work with you. The Atlantic Salmon Trust's Missing Salmon Project, the largest European tagging and tracking project launched in the Moray Firth this year. 850 salmon smolts were tagged in a determined effort to understand their migration routes and to identify where and why so many fish were going missing in action and what we can do about it. We set out with a plan. You supported us. And this is what we've achieved so far.
The Missing Salmon Project is an ambitious and groundbreaking programme. For this project, we're using acoustic telemetry. It's a proven method for tracking fish through the rivers, the estuary and out into the ocean. In a huge collaboration with our partners, Glasgow University, Marine Scotland Science, Fisheries Trusts and Boards and the public, we deployed receivers by boat across the inner Moray Firth, the Dornoch Firth and all the way from the east of Spey Bay across to Brora. We've also deployed a further line of receivers spanning 12 nautical miles directly north of Fraserburgh. At the same time, the teams worked tirelessly, travelling thousands of miles up and down the 7 river systems with the amazing people on those rivers deploying the receivers in strategic locations. This meticulously planned, complex and labour-intensive work was all executed in time for the spring migration of smolts. What was then involved was a sample of migrating smolts were intercepted across the 7 rivers by using smolt traps. We carefully fitted each smolt with a uniquely identifiable acoustic tag that each radiated a ping out into the water. These fish rejoin the migrating population and continue downstream towards the marine feeding grounds. As they navigate their way downstream, the receivers register these unique pings and store the information until the smolt migration has finished. Again, the people and organisations involved were so valuable to this process. Over 15 million pings were registered by our receivers during the course of this project. We are tirelessly and urgently analysing this huge amount of information from the project and what it all means. The initial results suggest higher than expected losses of smolts before they reach the salt water, and much lower losses as they move out from the coast. We now know that around half our young salmon are missing in action as they move down the rivers towards the sea. The fish that do make it to the salt water move rapidly and appear to disperse and take a range of routes out into the firth towards the open ocean. Whilst these results are clearly concerning, it's exciting to know that we now have evidence and we're using that to guide future management and actually help with positive changes.
So, what's next? What we need to do in year 2 is to dig deeper to find out why these losses are happening. For example, are they related to river conditions, predation, or just a part of life? The Atlantic Salmon Trust has taken a positive leap forward to discovering what is happening to our iconic fish, and sharing this information is a work in progress. We celebrate the success of an incredible year for the Missing Salmon project and the start of the Likely Suspects framework.
We shouldn't jump to conclusions, as there's still a lot of thorough detailing and checking to do before we can bring you the final findings of this project. What management actions have to be made to help stop this iconic fish from missing out on a future?
It's not a secret that our salmon are in crisis. Only by pulling together our expertise, knowledge and resources can we give salmon the best chance in the future. In order to expand and achieve all that we hope to achieve, we have formed the Missing Salmon Alliance, as it represents the most sensible and proactive way to understand what is causing this crisis and lobby for change. We look forward to sharing more evidence as it becomes available, and also share how this information will be used to answer more questions, to form better management, and most importantly, putting wild salmon first.
Right. Let's bring everyone back in.
Okay.
Thought of a better intro to today's session than that. Are you both? Can you both see and hear me again? And
I can see perfectly.
are we
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Right. So, I mean, what a huge project to start off with, really. And I know that we could be on here all day talking about this because it's such a massive, massive subject. And the video that we just watched, if I'm right in thinking, Mark and Tiggy, is that tagging was done last year. So now we're at the point where those first results after a year are coming back. But what can you tell us, first of all, about the background to this project? Why it was necessary, and really how it was possible, both in terms of the people involved and raising funds for it.
Okay. The background to the project is the state of salmon, and we've gone from, I suppose, in the mid 1980s we had about 8 to 10 million salmon swimming around the whole Atlantic, and that's from Russia, Norway, over to Canada, Iceland and down to Spain, the full range of Atlantic salmon. And since the 1980s, they've dropped to about 2 or 3 million nowadays. So we've been on a really long and protracted decline in salmon numbers. And if we're not to lose them, we need to understand what's causing that decline. And just as importantly, what we can do about it. How can we look after them better? How can we promote the good conditions they need to not just survive, but to really thrive?
Well, I was going to say that, you know, there's some encouraging signs from a lot of rivers this year with stronger runs than usual, but the overall trajectory of salmon is very much in decline. So, you know, we can talk about these encouraging runs in certain rivers at the moment, but as you say, we're dealing with a steady decline over that kind of period. So the key thing I think that stands out for me about this particular project, and I remember when I first came to the launch in a theatre cinema in London, there was a lot more openness, I thought, than had been previously about the well, I think it's what you guys call the likely suspects framework, and we hear a lot of anecdotal evidence from you know, a gilly here or a fisherman there or an estate or it might be a netting company, it might be aquaculture sector, and they all have different, you know, there's all different places that blame is attributed. So what can you tell us about that likely suspects framework, and who are the likely suspects that have been investigated?
The suspects, there are more suspects than you can shake a stick at. I mean, everyone has an opinion. Whether there's plenty of suspects that gain traction out there. There's others that are a bit wilder ideas. And what we're trying to do is think like a big casualty department in a hospital, and assess these different pressures or the different suspects, and find out what evidence is there on how they really are impacting on fish. What's their part in the decline in salmon? And then we can start, like a casualty department, we can start triaging them. Some we can focus in on, the ones that we can manage, and manage the manageables always. But for those that we can't manage, we still need to be able to understand them and take them into account. But the end is to get to the areas that we can really focus in on to make that difference for salmon.
Well, I remember when the three of us first spoke, we had a bit of a tester yesterday or the day before, and we said that there may be issues out at sea that are huge global issues, but I think I'm right in saying that what this project's trying to do is identify those, as you say, those things that we really can manage in the freshwater environment. And I suppose it was a huge undertaking getting funds for this as well, which is sort of where you come in, Tiggy, and well, you'll no doubt you're both heavily involved in that. But how much money had to be raised to get this project off the ground, and where did that support come from?
It's been a mammoth task by the team. I think you can't say it was one person. I mean, from our chairman down, the boys have been exceptional. I mean, it was £1.3 million to get that whole project underway, and it's come from river boards and individuals and government and universities, and everybody finally is coming together to help save our sailor. I mean, Mark would agree. It's been a mammoth team effort.
There's over 50 organisations that have put their weight behind this project, and it is an ambitious programme, hugely ambitious, and you need that support to really make a difference. We're in this to really understand what's happening to the salmon so we can turn it around, and you know, one man and his dog's just not going to be able to achieve that. We need to bring these people with us, and we've been very open in working in partnership, because people have got good ideas, can bring information, thoughts, resources to the party, so that we can get the job done. And that's what salmon deserve, and that's what we need to deliver.
And I think I mean, the thing about this, to me, I think, is that this is about getting raw data, real evidence on paper. There's so many times that, and you know, rightly or wrongly, a lot of people are probably bang on about some things. A lot of people are probably a bit off, but one person's individual experience in one particular river or even one particular beat, you know, there'll be, well, it's cormorants, well, it's predators, well, it's fish farms, well, it's ocean currents. You need to have, I think I'm right in saying that in order to get actual action taken and sort of legislative change, if that's what's required, you need to have actual science behind it. So is that the key? Was that the key aim of this overall?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's no shortage of opinions, but opinions aren't going to change policy and regulations. And if we're finding that we have a certain problem, we need to be able to get the evidence together and communicate that to the policymakers and take them with us, and really convince them that they need to take these steps. And there may have to be some quite brave steps that they take to protect salmon.
Well, we'll look at some of the results and things in a short while. But in terms of how the project was actually carried out, Tiggy, you touched on it briefly in terms of volunteers, universities, organisations that were all behind it. But I'm going to drop in some of the photos that you've both sent me earlier today. Now, this one in the stream there that you should be able to see in the bottom right. That one has a particular meaning for me because I recognize that as the river where I learned to salmon fish and where I caught my first salmon back as a 10 or 11-year-old. If I'm not mistaken, that is Falls of Shin on the River Shin. So we can see a couple of people up to something there. And if we also look at this, it's not going to show fantastically if you're watching on a small stream, but that looks like a smolt trap. And then this one might be a bit better. We've got a chap here and you can see the smolt trap more clearly there. So what we had a bit of an overview in that initial video, but what was the process of actually getting a receiver into a smolt? How was the sample size chosen? And Tiggy, I believe that you have your own smolt or part of the fundraising activity.
I do. I had Smelteaser, and he was caught in the smolt trap at Ballindalach on the Spey, on one of the tributaries. And Smelteaser made it. He got the whole way to the Murray Firth. Yes. Well,
I mean, I'm sure he didn't get any special treatment being your smolt, but I'm sure he was put in with the rest of the gang. But I mean, great to hear that one in particular made it out past the receivers. But what's the process of catching them and selecting them and you know getting this receiver into them so that they can transmit data back?
Well, we started in the Murray Firth because about 20% of the UK salmon go out through the Murray Firth. It's got some big rivers going in with good populations of fish, and we need to be able to catch fish, to be able to tag them. So we took 7 rivers to get this big regional project because it's numbers. And you need those numbers so the scientists can do the statistics and to make sure that what you're picking up is valid. So they took 7 rivers right around the Murray Firth, from the Devon all the way through the Spey, the Findhorn, the Ness, and all the way up the Conan, Oikel and Shin. And the rivers were chosen because we knew that they could produce the smolts of the right size. You need the smolts to be big enough to be able to take tag, so the tag doesn't impair the fish. We were typically collecting them with rotary screw traps, so that a big Archimedes screw in the water that revolves and collects the fish, puts them into a holding tank where you can go and collect them in the box behind the drum, and they're collected quite safely. And the biologists come along, sort out the fish they can tag. Then a tagging team would come along, take a whole bunch of measurements from the fish. So we knew the shape of the fish, the size of the fish. We took genetic samples and then inserted the tag. And then after about an hour, the fish were released back in on their merry way. And you saw in the video the fish being released back into the river, those fish that had been tagged.
And I suppose that that's only half or even less than half of the job, because actually getting the receivers in place must have been probably, I mean, that was probably the biggest task. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been really blessed with this project with 7 fishery boards and trusts that have literally pushed the boat out. They put receivers all the way down their rivers, and they gave us a hand on the we got the receivers out to sea. So we put in 3 lines of arrays going across the Moray Firth. So we had the inner ones, and then we had one from Spey Bay right across to Brora, and then one that went north from Fraserburgh, so we could intercept fish at sea. What we learned is it's quite easy to put stuff on the seabed. It's twice as hard to get it back up again.
Yeah. Or looking at some of the weather up in that neck of the woods, probably quite difficult to get it to stay there as well sometimes.
Yeah, they're on about an 80-kilo weight at the bottom of the sea, and the receivers are just hydrophones that listen for the tags as they go past, and they store the information on them. So there's no fancy satellite links or anything like that. You actually have to go and get your receiver back from 50, 60, 70 meters of water, get it back on the boat and download it.
Wow. Which is probably, I mean, is this one of the vessels that we're looking at there? And
yes.
And was that, I mean, going back to the sort of fundraising element as well with you, Tiggy, I suppose a lot of this was about getting volunteers, universities, students, and all these organizations on board to help with those kind of tasks.
There was an amazing team. The head tagging man, Matt Newton, who was amazing. The volunteers up the coast that came and helped and spent hours and hours in the pouring rain, from someone called Richard White, who's on the Spey. He was guarding the receivers for their life, because obviously with big space, you need concrete blocks to hold the receivers in the river.
Yeah.
But if I can go back quickly to the tagging as a complete layman, and obviously not a scientist, it was absolutely fascinating to see, having heard about tagging projects, to actually be there and to see this tiny little tag being inserted inside a smolt, who Matt then sewed him up, and as the anaesthetic wore off, Smolteaser got put in a bucket just to calm and get his bearings back again. And then we actually put Smolteaser and what was he called? Smolty Gonzales, because we did the sponsor a smolt, and you gave the name, because then obviously instead of just a digital number, it was sort of personal. And then to see Smolteaser sitting back in the arm, waiting to go off, and you're thinking, oh my golly, this tiny, tiny thing is going to disappear off to the Moray Firth. And because he was chunky and fat and the right length, we got him, he made it out to sea. So I'm praying that he comes back as a 25-pound Spey salmon in about 2 years' time.
So, Tiggy, before we talk about results that have come in general, it might be interesting to focus on that particular Smolteaser's individual journey. So what sort of length of time are we talking about from and speed of moving down the river? What does that journey for an individual smolt look like?
He did it so quickly. From Ballandalloch to the estuary, he did it in 5 days.
Right. Okay. And
just
moving down in groups, shoaling up, and before we kind of touch on those likely suspects, perhaps both of you can talk about what dangers and threats a smolt like that one would face on the way down, and then we can talk about some of the data.
Okay. What are the suspects going down? There's the obvious suspects that you see, and you'll see bird predation going on different rivers through cormorants, goosanders, mergansers, things like that. All those that you see. There's all those that you don't see as well, such as the big trout. sea trout taking smolts, or the pike, or when they get into the estuaries, the bass. So what this technology is helping us to unlock is both the obvious suspects and the ones that are perhaps not so obvious when we have a first look. And that can be ranging from things like water quality to habitat. Do they get held up behind a weir or a dam or a canal, something like that, as they go downstream? Because if they get held up, it's just as damaging to them if they get delayed, because fish are designed to go to sea at a certain time when their food is going past. And if they miss that food going past, it's not a happy ending. And so they're really good just in time management, those exponents of that. And so if we delay them, then it's as good as them dying. And
if a smolt, there's a sort of smoltification window, as you allude to, and actually that I've read certain things that say if a smolt fails to make it to saltwater within that window when its physiology is changing, that it will just never reach adult maturity. It can become a sort of freshwater locked type of miniature smolt salmon. I don't know if that's, it's a recent thing that I've read, but certainly enough that there seems to be a lot of evidence that if that migration is interrupted by only a few days, then that they miss that crucial window.
Yeah. So and what we're seeing is we're starting to see climate change. For the last 30, 40, 50 years, we're seeing that the rivers are starting to heat up at a different rate to the sea. And there's a mismatch between when fish go to sea, we're seeing them go earlier and earlier. And is their food ready for when they go to sea? So there's periods of starvation and things like this going on. So this is what we're trying to understand so that we can manage the catchments more effectively for salmon.
And of course, those suspects that we mentioned are going to be entirely different, possibly from one river to the next, which is why a project like this was so vital, because there's never going to be a one-size-fits-all conservation solution for a species like this. There's a couple of comments that have popped up, but we'll touch on that in a sec, because I feel like we'll get there anyway. But if we can move it on from that project background and the challenges and the amazing feats involved in getting that going. But where are we now? What data has come in? Are there any surprising things that you've discovered at this stage? Are there any hypotheses that have been confirmed, or some things that have been thrown out of the window? How are we looking at the moment?
Well, the aim in year one last year was to find out where the fish died. Where did they go missing? And we did that. We were very surprised at how many went missing in action in fresh water. A lot of the information was that the problem, if you spoke to a river manager, that the problems were all out at sea. We're doing everything we can in our river, and the problems are all out at sea. And we were surprised by the small number of salmon that were confirmed as making it to the estuary. So that was quite a surprise for us, and that was quite consistent through all 7 rivers. It was a general pattern. 1 or 2 were a bit worse, but perhaps for understandable reasons, still water and other issues. But there was a general pattern that only about half of the young salmon, were confirmed as making it to the sea. We then lost about another 15% as they moved out into the inshore environment, from the inner arrays through to the Spey Bay array. We couldn't get a full count right across the Murray Firth from Fraserburgh, because we couldn't stretch that far. You'll see it on the video, the maps of the arrays. But we know that the fish were moving quite quickly, and against the prevailing currents mostly. So they were actively swimming when they went to sea. But again, the surprise for us was just the volume that was lost in fresh water.
And does that bit about actively swimming confirm, or perhaps start to confirm, theories about set migration routes rather than smolts being carried on on currents?
So we know the smolts leave a river like the Spey, and for grills they've got to go and feed off the Norwegian coast, and for multi-sea winter they move further off to further north and west, as far west as the west coast of Greenland. And we've never tracked that many. There's a gap in knowledge of UK fish and how they move to their feeding grounds. And we were seeing that the fish were going more easterly than northeasterly. 80% of them, I think, from memory, were going more easterly out of the Moray Firth and heading north to Norway. And they were swimming against the current, so we don't know if they were they picking up food? Were they knowing that they had to migrate to this point of the ocean before they could pick up their conveyor belt? And it was just an more efficient route for them to use to get north. So those are the next step for us, to find out where they go after we lose them off these arrays.
Did that proportion of losses before you get to the estuarine environment, I think you said half. Am I right in saying, Mark?
Yeah.
Was that a figure that you were both expecting, or obviously we haven't yet begun to attribute what the possible causes are for that, but did that particular figure surprise you, or were you expecting that?
Yeah, no, it was a surprise. And I think it was, when you speak to all of the volunteers from the boards and the trusts around, and you go and talk to people, they were all as equally as surprised as we were. And I think some of the researchers had seen similar patterns on other rivers when they'd done a pilot study on the Conan and a bigger study on the Dee, and they'd seen similar issues also on the Devon. And it's is that normal? And what we're seeing is, well, it's now over 7 rivers in 1 year, and we need to understand whether that's new or it's always been that way. You know, it's part and parcel of the salmon's life cycle that only half get to sea. Well, we don't know that at the moment.
But there's certainly been a change, I think, hasn't there, in how many of those come back as returning adults. And I remember that when we first at that the launch event in London, Tiggy, I think you grabbed me to the side, and one of the first things you said was, "There's only 5 of them coming back now, when there used to be 20." So clearly there's, I mean, it's just a shocking figure when you think that out of 100 smolts like the one that the particular one that you were able to name and track, there's only an estimated 5 of them coming back. So chances are for Smolteser, and God bless him, he's got a hell of a challenge ahead.
I think that's to me why this project is so important. You know, Hugh Falker said, if you don't have a smolt factory, you're not going to have your salmon. So with the likely suspects, climate change, and the other dramas out at sea, which we all know, who flop about in the front of the Moray Firth, on the front of Spey Bay, having a marvellous time chasing them. They have such a battle now. And that is why I think it is so important that this project happens, because, as you know, which I'm sure we'll come on to, it was meant to happen again this year, and we were 24 hours off launching the second wave. And I'm in wholly agreement with everybody, because we all know certain problems on our rivers, because I call it the Black Death. I thought it's very unpolitically correct of me to say so, but we know what it is. There's flappy black things that come up and down the river. But there is so many other things as well. And if we collectively can do it together, then all the data from this can be used. Next year's data could be used, and we actually can make a difference. Well, there really is a genuine difference to be made here.
Exactly, and it all comes back to getting that evidence and data and a unique subset of evidence for each river system. It might be fish-eating birds in one place, it might be barriers to migration in another. But you brought us on perfectly, Tiggy, to one of the comments that Tom here has dropped into the comment section a little while back.
I agree with him.
further evidence pointing to cormorant and goosander predation then. So fish-eating birds are a massive talking point. Is there any, to what extent can we attribute those losses that we've learned about already, that the data says, to that? To what extent can they be attributed to migration barriers or water quality? It's a big issue, that one, or anything that involves predator control. It's always going to be a bit of a touchy subject for some people. But what's the balance like of issues?
It's a very emotive subject, and we need some good information to have a steer through what is. There's lots of, no pun intended, but bear traps on all sides around, because one person's vermin is another person's protected species. And what we did with the first year was work out where our fish went missing in action, and we're pretty clear about that now. And what we need to do is focus in on the likely suspects. And yes, fish-eating birds are one of the likely suspects. But there is a way to go from suspect to culprit. And we know that the fish-eating birds eat fish. Some people would disagree with that, but they do eat plenty of smolts as they go down. We need to know the impact of that predation on the population and what it's doing. And then we need to be able to present that to the policymakers so they can work out how to protect the salmon in a way that's acceptable to the wider public. And we need to take them with us. We're going to probably be asking them to take some quite difficult decisions. If the suspect does become a culprit, then we're going to have a good level of evidence and talk to people and look at how we manage these birds, if we're able to manage these birds, and what we do about it. One of the biggest problems that salmon face was twofold. One is ignoring the problem, and I think with fish-eating birds and other suspects, and there are a whole host of other suspects out there, we can't ignore them. And the second one is apathy, which is, this is just too difficult a problem to try and tackle. We need the information to be able to have a grown-up conversation so that we can get policy in the right place, and then that provides the fishery managers with the tools to look after the fish. Because if we don't look after them, we got to start warning in January in Scotland. There was a reception at the Scottish Parliament, and one of the leading scientists for salmon in Scotland said, we have 20 years to save this species. Now, he didn't go into detail what that meant, whether it was extinction or whether it was we wouldn't be able to go out fishing or any of that detail. He was very clear and unequivocal for a scientist. We have 20 years to save it. So we need this information if we're going to look after salmon. And then we need to get the fishery managers to have the right tools at their disposal to do the job that they need to do.
One of the things that I hear, may or may not be true, when talking about likely suspects, is that our rivers are now cleaner or healthier than they were in the past when we had larger numbers of fish. But are people not making a distinction between what was then industrial pollution and is now agricultural pollution? Or how are we in terms of our water quality now? Getting away from predation for a moment.
So in the clip, we saw a colleague of ours, Colin Bull, who is the principal investigator for the likely suspects framework. One of the things that Colin's looking at is the baggage that young salmon pick up in their freshwater phase of their life cycle. They really are like the canaries of both the rivers and the sea, and they're picking up chemicals in freshwater, and they can be, we talk about the organic pollutants, which are very obvious to see, but there's also those micro pollutants, which can change, really low levels of pesticide residues, which can affect their smolting rate, can affect their behavior at sea and their ability to feed at sea. So when fish when they leave our freshwater environment, We know they're carrying with them a certain amount of baggage, which may well be impacting their ability to survive on the high seas. So we need to understand both the freshwater environment and the high seas environment so we can get the conditions right for those salmon to have the right set of baggage to be able to complete their life cycle and come back well. And I think that's where we're going wrong at the moment. It's not just pesticides, but it's the whole gambit of things that they pick up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's possible that, you know, yes, we might not have as much heavy industry on our riverbanks as we did in the past, but like you say, that doesn't mean that pollution, a different type of pollution, is happening. Which, and I suppose the loss of insect and invertebrate life is, which we've read about a lot in recent years, is intrinsically linked to par survival, fry survival, and smolt survival. When I first brought this up, Tiggy, a second ago, I saw you shaking your head there when I mentioned water quality. But I know you've got some particular. I mean, am I right in thinking you have some particular issues on that with your local rivers?
How politically correct do I have to be here? I mean, Wales has had some catastrophic disasters on the Towie, in the Typhi, slurry dumping. We've got algae blooms on the Wye. I mean, I'm not going to point any fingers at anybody. I mean, for example, I picked up 44 black bags of rubbish out of our stretch here at home this spring. So when you have a combination, that's all man-made. That's all us. That isn't Mama Nature messing about. That is us. And I think that certainly if you're on a river, don't walk past your can, pick it up. You know, if you see a whole mass of green algae bloom happening on your tributary or at the beginning of your, report it. You know, the poor guys on the Typhi and the Towie, I mean, they had 25,000 tons of slurry dumped in the river.
It's, you know, I don't know if it's just what that, and again, as you very carefully put it a second ago, you know, it's without attributing individual blame or anything at this stage, but it seems to me that a lot of what I read about with these agricultural pollution incidents do seem to affect a lot of Welsh salmon and sea trout rivers. No doubt it does happen all over the UK, but it does seem like it's a particularly bad issue in your neck of the woods at the moment, Tiggy.
It's a real battle, actually, and you know, there's a couple of guys like Stephen Jones, for example, who's fighting the cause for the Suin here, because the numbers have dropped off the Richter scale to what they were. You know, the west of Wales was the best sea trout, you know, other than Loch Marie and others up north, but they were phenomenal rivers, and the Usk has crashed without a shadow of a doubt. I know the southern migratory route is a major issue. Mark will agree with me that, you know, we know Spain, France, Wales, that there's a major issue with the southern route. But we've got real issues here, and I'm not going to point a finger at anybody, but it's all human. It's all us doing it. And therefore, as we've said before, we collectively can do so much to stop all this and help it. If the policymakers actually go, no, I'm really sorry, you cannot do that anymore, then it will really help them. And they are a keystone species. You know, we've got SSI all over Wales, and it's pretty much ignored, but I'm getting on my bandwagon now. So move on.
I think it touches on wider society, because salmon and sea trout are one of those really few species that tell us about the health of our rivers, the general health of our rivers, and the health of our seas. And they're telling us very, very clearly that something is very wrong with our rivers and our seas. This species has been around for millions of years. It's survived ice ages. It's colonized the whole of the northern hemisphere, and it's now dwindling away. And it's because of the conditions and the apathy we show towards this species. So we need to take a conscious effort to look after it. Otherwise, those words that we will lose the fish will come true. Because if we're going to lose them in Scotland, we are going to lose them in England, Wales, and Ireland as well. And there's nothing special about Scotland, and we need to look after these fish. Otherwise, that's it.
Well,
we can't lose them on our watch.
No.
Sorry, Tiggy, say again. I didn't quite hear you then.
Sorry, I interrupt you. We cannot lose these fish on our watch.
Yeah.
I cannot look my children in the eye and say, I'm really sorry. I behaved so badly in my 20s, and now I'm saying we've got to hang on to them. Together, we can do something about this.
I mean, I think that the fact that a salmon is the ultimate survivor, and this is still happening, is the really scary thing, because we've seen the insanely fast-flowing, dangerous, perilous rivers, and we've seen where they can spawn in just the slightest bit of water. We've seen, that they put up with so much, and we've probably all caught fish that have shown that they've been in a wrestling match with a seal on their way back, or a dolphin chunk out of it. These fish are just born survivors, and the fact that we're still looking at that graph going down, as Mark said, that it's clearly showing us that something in our freshwater or marine environment is wrong. So, I mean, you've talked a little bit about some of the results that are coming in. I don't know if you, perhaps there are some things that you would rather not go into massive detail about now before we have that corroborating evidence from another year. I mean, is that the case of where we're at the moment, guys? That we're being very careful about attributing that blame until you have that extra data.
Yeah, I think it would be wrong to jump to conclusions, because then there's a human reason for that, and that's because then people jump into their silos and you can't have a sensible discussion. I think we need to, with open eyes, look at where the research takes us next, as where we try and identify what the suspects are, which suspects are responsible for the fish going missing as they go down the rivers, and to really understand that. And then once we've established that, and we were due to be going out there again this year, this spring, but with coronavirus, we had to delay for obvious reasons. But we're seeing what we can bring back in the autumn. We are looking to do some work looking at poo. We're doing some scat analysis, because you are what you eat, and we're trying to find out if what percentage of the feces from different predators contain salmon. So we can look at the whole range. So we're looking to do that this autumn as a pilot study for coming back next year in the smolt run, and really finding out, what is responsible for these fish going missing, because we need to understand that, and we then need to understand and work out if it's manageable and how it's best to be managed.
And realistically, there are probably, if I'm not mistaken, there are probably going to be some areas that are manageable, or at least more manageable than others, which is again why, and that comes into, there's political reasons for that. There's various lobbying groups, but at least by getting this evidence, we can identify areas that we can make a difference on.
Yeah, I would much rather have an informed debate and with the evidence, and so that you can then come up with a balanced decision on how you take forward fisheries management.
So going forward, I mean, we'll of course. I mean, it'd be fantastic to have you both on again in the future, when we can look at some more of that data that comes in. But where are we heading next? I know that you have a plan for a West Coast smolt tagging project, which brings in the huge aquaculture element that is not present on the East Coast, or not perhaps to the extent. So again, it's that different causes in different river systems probably. But what can you tell us about that? And then I'd love to move on, especially this is where you come in hugely, Tiggy, is about that fundraising required. We're going to talk about the Salmon Club. We're going to talk about membership and ways that you can support the Atlantic Salmon Trust. But where are we heading, and what can you tell us about the West Coast project?
With the West Coast, there's the West Coast is West Coast Salmon Tracking Project. What we want to do, in really simple terms, is look at the routes that young salmon take once they leave the river of their birth, how they migrate out to sea. Again, we know they've got to get up to Norway. We pick them up off the slope current, which is on the continental shelf just to the north and west of the Outer Hebrides, but we don't know how we get there. And there's quite a lot of development in that area. You've got the aquaculture industry, but we've also got the offshore renewable industry. There's a lot of energy out there in waves and wind, and people want to do a lot of building out there. And we have no idea of how the fish get out to sea and the challenges they face on the way. We've got some good ideas and we've got good common sense, but that can only carry you so far. We need the evidence. And the work is to follow fish. We're going to be tagging fish, hopefully from the Nith in the Solway Firth, all the way up the west coast, up to the Laxford in the northwest in Sutherland, and out across to the Outer Hebrides, and looking at one or two rivers on the Outer Hebrides, and use the same technology that we did in the Moray Firth and replicate that on the west coast so we can follow those fish out and see where they go and what they can tell us on their way.
And does that present different challenges? I was going to ask, are you using the same type of receivers and tags, but are there unique challenges that are for you on the west coast in terms of terrain or sea or weather or currents or?
Yes. First of all, the scale. I never thought I would describe the Moray Firth as a nice confined area, but compared to the west coast of Scotland, literally from the border with England up to the northwest coast of Sutherland and out to the Hebrides, it's a mammoth area. It's a huge undertaking. It's really going to test the team. We're blessed. We've got really good support from Glasgow University, from Marine Scotland, from people up and down. The fishery boards and trusts have been phenomenal. They're volunteering their time. They've been crying out for this sort of work for years to understand where their fish go. And they're really stepping up to the plate. They've been brilliant. I mean, we were just in a few hours being able to deploy all of the equipment this year until we had lockdown. But we'll be back. We'll be back next year for the spring, and we'll get it underway. We're just working out how we can fine-tune the work that we're doing to get the most out of it next year. So that we're not losing a whole year. We're seeing what we can condense and deliver with some gusto next year.
Absolutely. So the West Coast project scheduled for, are we still very much in the fundraising element for that project? Or had that come in the first round of fundraising?
Yeah, we've had some support. We've had some support from Scottish Government through the Maritime Fisheries Fund to buy all of the equipment. And we bought all of the receivers and the tags that we needed, courtesy of them, and then support from others to actually go and deliver it. So we have all of that kit. Unfortunately, we've got to go and buy a new set of tags. The batteries, they're sealed units, and they run out of power after a year, and they won't last long enough. So we need to go and buy some new tags, which sounds relatively easy, but it's about £250,000 worth of tags that we need to go and buy.
I remember you saying to me on that first evening that the cost of those tags, because of the technology in them and the miniaturization of it, that's a huge expense for the Atlantic Salmon Trust. So yeah. £250,000 for that next round of tags.
Yeah, so £250,000 for the tags, and then probably another £300,000-400,000 of people and boats. It's boats that are expensive, and we're getting some support from boats. I think the aquaculture industry recognise their responsibilities and are willing to put stuff on the seabed and pick it up again, which helps us enormously. And we appreciate that. We've had the same from Scottish Government with their research vessels to offers of deploying and picking up equipment. And what it is people coming together to get a good understanding, and they realise that they need to, and it's really heartening.
Well, that's a massive challenge that we all have, I think, in the wild fish sector, if that's what you can call us. But Tiggy, there's so much going on your side of things as well in terms of raising those funds. I mean, we've got, I've been to a couple of the events down in London before, but I know we've got the Salmon Club, we've got auctions, and what can you tell us about that sort of fundraising pipeline? What is going to be happening, and what should people look out for?
Right. Well, where can I start? Next Salmon Club due November, and Salmon Club members the Salmon Club was started by George Percy, our president, and Muggins, because we wanted your generation to get involved. Because in a minute, us old bags are going to be rejected, really. And so therefore, your gang, your generation are so enthusiastic and so up for helping that we wanted to start a really fun, young, I say that, there are a few more mature members of the Salmon Club, but the majority are your ilk, your generation, because there's no apathy, there is no question of we can't do this. Well, why can't we do it? Let's do it. Come on, get on. And they're just a really, really fun gang at the moment, and hopefully those numbers will grow. And Will Davis and Tom Leslie, who are the sort of big boys at the top of the gang running the whole Salmon Club, want to spread it out. So there'll be a team in Edinburgh, hopefully, and maybe a team in Yorkshire, or there'll be a team down in Exeter that can get together, can have a chat, can find out about the science from us, can get information about us. We've got a lot of amazing companies. Thank you, Farlows, for helping us, and others, that will give Salmon Club member discounts on things, because let's face it, you're not all earning a fortune, and every penny off something will help the team. You get lovely goodies from me. And you get an incredibly good feeling that you are actually contributing to helping Sailor.
Yeah. Tiggy, that if with and I know that you guys run some fantastic events which are not only there to help raise money, but also, I mean, they're darn good fun, and also they're very educational as well. There's always speakers, there's always presentations, and something like the Salmon Club, which I think Mark touched on, is that, and I know that yes, you talk about the younger generation, but really it's getting those like-minded people who are behind a shared cause in a room together a few times a year. And then you keep that community together and able to do things in the future, like the projects that you guys are doing now. So I think it's an amazing thing. And what I'll do is when the video finishes, we'll direct some people to resources about the Salmon Club and upcoming events. But if anyone's watching and they want to donate, do some of their individual fundraising, can they do that sort of thing easily as well?
Yes, we've had amazing boys running marathons for us, and a lovely chap called Harry Dawes who's going to run the London Marathon for us this year, but I think he's going to have to do it in October now, poor boy. Will Davis and sorry, say again, I lost you.
I said it might not be quite as sweaty in October, so that might be a...
and Will Davis and a team of boys, they did 5 marathons in 5 days last year on the rivers, and then Will got on an aeroplane in Edinburgh, having run 4 marathons in 4 days, then did the London Marathon. Hopefully we might have a team going up Kilimanjaro in a minute, and that could raise us a lot of money, as well as having a great expedition and a great, as you said, to me, it's vital that it's fun. It's got to be fun and interesting, and a community that the majority fish, but we've got members who don't fish, just desperately want to help conserve sailor. With climate change and the awareness of our environment, a lot of younger than me, the old bag, are very aware of that. And that's fantastic, because you're our leading lights. Can you hear that noise? There's a terrier going mad on the door. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to open the door, because if he does anything else, you'll go mad.
So I'll finish off then on that section, because the Salmon Club, it's that first step in trying to create a movement to overcome that apathy. You need people. You don't just need me and Tiggy and the other people, the team at the AST talking about it. You need other people talking about it and getting involved and asking their MPs, their MSPs, and whoever, what are you doing about it? What's your view on this? Things like we talked about diffuse pollution. There's the agriculture bill going through. How, MP, are you looking after the river? How are you safeguarding this capital that we have, this value in our countryside for future generations? Because if you don't nurture it, then you're going to lose it.
And I think that this issue is now spreading outside of what would typically be considered the angling, the fly fishing community. And I've certainly noticed that in recent years, the awareness about salmon conservation in general. It's not just an issue for people like us who enjoy recreational angling and want to see better, healthier rivers and better returns. This is about our native wildlife. This is a wildlife conservation. It's a frontline wildlife conservation issue. And what I think is great about the Salmon Club is that can't spread out to the wider populace without first having that core of people who are very, very well connected to it. So that's why I see it as a fantastic thing. And I urge everyone to head over to the Atlantic Salmon Trust's website material, join the Salmon Club. Tiggy, just remind us again when that next event, that next upcoming event was.
We've got the next Salmon Club due on November the 18th, and it's going to be at the end of the auction. So the auction will run through September and October, where it's not just mega bucks. There's things for everybody, from 25 quid all the way up to some amazing goodies. For example, we got a safari given to us in Africa for next year or the year after if they want to take it. So there is something for everybody. I'm very conscious that everybody hasn't got lots of wonga. And so there are the one end of the scale to the other end of the scale. And that will happen, as I said, from September, October, and then the Salmon Club do at the Westminster Boating Base on November the 18th. Brilliant. And everybody's welcome. Email me and we'll send you an invitation. Come and learn, listen, have a drink. I hope we're going to have a bit of a hoolie after this corona thing. Because I think everybody needs a bit of white relief, to be quite honest.
I was going to say, I think there's quite a few people who will be absolutely gasping for a glass of champagne by then. Well, here at Farlows, we'll be sure to keep sharing your news, those auctions, those raffles and things that are happening, and then your future events as well. I know for one that be down there and supporting you guys. So, we've rattled on today for a little over an hour, but I just want to thank you both for joining me today, and thank you for people who've been tuning in. If you've been watching along, or if you weren't able to watch it live, remember it is saved on our Facebook in our video library. Watch it again, share with your friends. Share the link in an email. It's all about spreading the word, and as I said, I'll update the video with some useful links from the Atlantic Salmon Trust for you. But Mark and Tiggy, massive thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much,
Johnny. Thanks for having this old bag. But can I just say that together we can do something. We really, really can. It's the apathy and the egos of certain, no, I'm not going to say that, but you know what I mean, that it is doable. It really is generally doable. And then I could look you in the eye when you're 50 and I'm 100 in my wheelchair and say, we did it and we turned the decline around, and actually your grandchildren, Johnny, will be catching their first fish in the Shin Pools.
Well, that's what I absolutely dream about, and it would be a tragedy, as you said, if that couldn't happen. And the work that you guys are doing to get that evidence to make real change possible, I think is fantastic.
Well, it's in all our hands to make that difference. I think, as David Attenborough said in the International Year of the Salmon, it's up to us, and it's all of us. So thank you for helping spread the word.
No
Thanks, John.
Great way to finish it. Great final thoughts there, Tiggy. And keep in touch with us. We'll get you on again. And once again to everyone. No, massive thank you. And we'll see everyone again for our next session.
See you in November.